I'd like to welcome everybody to this alumni public interest lunch, which is part of Public Interest Week. I don't need to tell people in this room that Penn Law School has had a lot of firsts in the public interest field. We were the first major law school to adopt a public service requirement as part of our curriculum here at the law school. We were a leader, obviously, in the, clinical activities. And the honorary fellow, I believe, we were probably one of the first law schools to truly honor public service and public interest in such a public way many years ago. But the idea behind Public Interest Week was really to provide synergies across a whole lot of different areas, to bring the Spare Symposium, to have an honorary fellow who would be part of the community for an extended period of time, to have alumni back, and really to cross-pollinate across a huge number of different areas. And this lunch is a way of welcoming back a number of alumni who have made their mark in the public service in a whole lot of different areas. And of course, one of the great hallmarks of Penn Law School is just that, what a difference so many of our alumni have had. You're just sort of looking out across both this room and thinking about alumni. We think now have 2 cabinet secretaries in Pennsylvania. We have a whole number of people who are serving in the ACLU, the Center for Constitutional Rights, the Southern Center for Human Rights, the Public Defenders Association, U.S. attorneys' offices across the United States, U.S. attorneys, and so on. And then when I look out at organizations in Philadelphia, I think literally every single public interest organization in Philadelphia has a large number of Penn people either leading them or heavily involved with them. I almost don't want to mention names because then I always leave somebody out, but obviously the Education Law Center, the Juvenile Law Center, Community Legal Services, with a whole number of different people in almost every position. So let me just say we're incredibly proud of the commitment our alumni have made. Part of what we're doing here today is to bring students and alumni together so they can talk about careers. But let me also say the law school has thrown an incredible amount of support behind public service and public interest activities. I understand it's not, what the extent to which what we'd like to be doing, and we'd always like to be doing more, but it really is an extraordinary array of different activities. Obviously, the impresario of most of this within the building is the executive director of the Toll Public Interest Center, Arlene Finkelstein, who has really done an exceptional job in putting all this together. And I just want to give Arlene. And she now has 3 people working in her office who are a bridge between the law school and the public interest community, both in guiding students on their pro bono projects in the law school as well as the public interest scholars, and also a bridge with the local community. There are a lot of successes that I think they and the faculty have been responsible for over the last few years. We have 4 students or alumni this year who have garnered prestigious fellowships, 1 Skadden, 1 Independence, 2 Equal Justice Foundation fellowships, which are really phenomenal, and we're really proud of students doing that. And we've really tried to work to support students in those applications. We also have 3 fellowships, public interest fellowships, for students immediately graduated that are funded through the law school. 1 through really a magnificent gift by the law firm of Langer, Grogan, and Diver, Howie Langer, John Grogan, and Ned Diver. Did I see John here? I said, hey, John, thank you for funding this. This is appropriately entitled the Langer, Grogan, and Diver Fellowship in Social Justice, but that's for a graduating student. We also have a fellowship that is funded through law school resources for a student anywhere in the world to engage in public interest activities, and then a Toll Public Interest Center fellowship, which is part-time in the center as well as in the local public interest community. So altogether, this turns out with 7 fellowships for our students graduating from the law school, and really is a way, I think, of helping them really get the experience to go out and make a name for themselves in the public interest community. We've also increased the number of Toll Public Interest scholarships. We now have 6 in a class, 18 together in the law school, and we are planning, hoping to increase that number going forward. And we have also expanded twice in recent years the support for loan forgiveness, really through the magnificent support of Bob Toll. So if you step back and look at this, I understand that we would very much like to be doing more, but over the last 5 years, we've really put, and I say this quite directly, millions of dollars into the public interest community and supporting in all sorts of different ways students in their careers. And I really want to say the purpose of that is literally both to help the education of students in the building, but also help the society at large. And we think Penn Law students have an incredible amount in service to the community, and we want to help as much as we can. So in any event, thank you to the alumni. We hope that you will be involved with students and helping them in entering their public service careers and become a part of Public Service Week. This is the second year that we've done it, and I think it was a great success last year, and from everything I've already heard, it's a great success this year. So, in any event, thank you all, and now I would like to turn it over to the impresario again of this week, Arlene Finkelstein. Arlene?
Thank you. Thanks all of you for being here. Welcome back, alumni. Welcome, students. And please join me in thanking Dean Fitz for his extraordinary support for all public interest at Penn Law School. Without further ado, it is my pleasure to introduce the bravest man in this law school right now, and that is Tuel Ben Salvina, who accepted our invitation to introduce his future employer, Nan Aaron, the president of Alliance for Justice. So, Ben, unless you change your mind, come on up.
Well, good afternoon, and thank you for attending the Public Interest Week Alumni Luncheon. And, as you all know, and as Dean Fitz mentioned, this event celebrates Penn commitment to public service with a coming together of Penn alumni and students who are devoted to social justice. As a current student and future entrant into public interest lawyering, seeing everyone here today lifts my spirits, especially now, during this time of economic crisis. This gathering serves as a symbol of a strong public interest community that thrives during periods of adversity. It is during such times of hardship that community and leadership become most important, so that we do not lose sight of achieving equal justice for all people. It is my pleasure to introduce Nan Aaron, President of Alliance for Justice and Penn's Public Interest Week Honorary Fellow in Residence. As an intern this coming summer at Alliance for Justice, as Arlene just mentioned, I am both excited and nervous to make this introduction. Nan is an example of a leader boldly standing up for civil rights in the face of a resistant judiciary, a recession leading many people to trample on individual rights because of limited resources, and a time in our history when it's much easier to simply follow the crowd. Nan has demonstrated a lifelong commitment to public service. She began her public service career as a trial attorney for the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission, fighting racial and gender discrimination in the workplace. And I can say from a personal note, and reading about Nan's courageous efforts to battle discrimination in the workplace has given me hope as a gay man that one day I and others similarly situated will be able to work without fear of persecution. In 1979, Nan founded the Alliance for Justice, which strives to advance the cause of justice for all Americans, strengthen the public interest community's influence on national policy, and foster the next generation of advocates. foreseeing that a necessary component of achieving social justice through the court system is to ensure that fair-minded judges serve in federal chambers. Nan created the Judicial Selection Project within the Alliance for Justice in 1985 that is at the forefront of assuring that fair and independent-minded judges get nominated and confirmed to the federal bench. Nan led the charge to defeat Robert Bork's nomination to the Supreme Court and was a critical voice in supporting the nomination of Roger Gregory, the first African-American judge to serve in the Fourth Circuit. Recently, the Judicial Selection Project, under Nan's leadership, helped to support the confirmation of Sonia Sotomayor, the first Latina jurist to serve on the High Court, and very recently to push for the nomination of Goodwin Liu to the Ninth Circuit, who, if confirmed, will become the only active Asian American judge on the federal courts of appeals in the entire nation. Nan's early insight of placing resources into guaranteeing that independent, unbiased judges serve on the federal judiciary has proven invaluable to the public interest community. As a student here at Penn, I have learned that judge-made procedural and substantive limitations to civil rights litigation play a pivotal role in denying social justice to countless underrepresented communities. After reading one restriction after another, I sometimes questioned whether my goal in becoming a public interest lawyer was for naught. It is from Nan's experiences and achievements, however, that I have been able to gain a strong sense of hope that the future of social justice litigation is bright. Nan has approached the reactionary judiciary with optimism, never quitting and advocating for civil rights in the face of constant resistance. This focus on optimism is necessary for all of us, and we can all learn from Nan's persistence and uplifting leadership style. Now, please join me in welcoming Nan Aaron.
Thank you, Bill. That was great. We'll take you. That was wonderful. Thank you very much. I can't tell you what a treat it is for me to be here. Last week, maybe 2 weeks ago, met with a group of recent graduates from the law school. And what they said about this school and what they said about Arlene and Tori and everyone else doing work in public interest law, the clinical programs, the pro bono requirements, the loan forgiveness, it was, I have to tell you, one of the most hopeful things that I've heard in a long time. So I really salute all of you here, Arlene, Tori, and her wonderful office, some of the alumni, Dean Fitz, and I really appreciate the opportunity to be here, and I would have to confess, equally important, getting the hell out of Washington, D.C. Although, as you may all know, it's a very exciting week in our nation's capital. We are on the cusp, knock on wood, of passing health care, hopefully in the House, and I think we're all hoping and working. Who would have thought last week, at my age, I would be protesting and volunteering to be arrested? It kind of brought me back to the 60s with a group of union workers and colleagues and comrades protesting a meeting held by the leaders of the insurance companies who were getting together in Washington to plot the defeat of health care. And a couple of us had volunteered to be arrested. I had $100 in my coat pocket, my lawyer's phone number written on my hand. My husband, when he dropped me off that day, my supportive husband said, "Nan, by the way, if you have to make a phone call today, I'm busy." So, but we circled of all places, these guys met in the Ritz-Carlton. I would say that's quite something for symbolism. But nevertheless, as Janet and David and Howard and others of us who did our fair share of protesting many years ago. This one was a piece of cake. We got arrested, and we didn't even get arrested. So I'm hoping, not just for health care and those 30 million individuals who will get insurance, but for all of us in this room who care about justice and the justice system, that we can pass this bill and, frankly, move on to other very pressing matters in Congress. Having said that, Lou suggested that I talk a little bit about myself, which I have to confess I'm not particularly comfortable doing, but I thought I might just share a little bit about my journey through public interest law. I went to law school just a few years ago in the early 1970s. After being and working in many prisons around the country, I thought that one way to really learn about the needs of people and the needs of individuals was to go into prisons, halfway houses, and get to know people. And most of the work that I did in those years was getting people their Social Security, making sure that women could have conjugal visits, men could have conjugal visits. And it occurred to me over those years that I really wasn't as interested in providing services to people as I was helping them to get out of prison. Most of the people in those years, and probably that's true today, were there for having committed economic crimes, nonviolent crimes. And one of the things those of you who have been in prisons or involved in criminal law know is that the longer you're in there, the harder it is to kind of take hold of your life when you leave. So I knew out of that experience that I really wanted to become a lawyer. Went through 3 arduous years of law school. I was not prepared for law school, unlike the rest of you who look very healthy and well-adjusted to me. I spent my 3 years actually working and keeping myself financially afloat, working at the Legal Aid Society. So for me, public interest law was deeply embedded in my personality. I had a dream my last year of law school of wanting to get, and I wonder if they still have these Reginald Heber Smith fellowships offered by Legal Services Corporation. Howard, they still have? No, they don't. Well, in any event, for me, Legal Services had these wonderful fellowships that had you go anywhere in the country doing legal services work, and did I work for this? I networked, I got my letters of recommendation, and boom, I didn't get it. And I thought, the world is going to come to an end, which is typically what happens when you don't get the dream job you're looking for. But what do you have to do? You kind of pick yourself up, graduated law school, and unlike most of my colleagues who had jobs in law firms, some in the government, I didn't have a job, which is, I think, the case with many law school graduates today. And that was a little bit of a difficult, challenging time, but nevertheless, I did get a job in Washington, D.C., having moved my family to New York City. All of a sudden, I got a call from the Equal Employment Opportunities Commission asking me if I wanted to come in for an interview. It wasn't the job that I had wanted, but it was a fine first place for me, primarily because of 2 things. One, I had a fabulous supervisor, and who would have thought having an amazing supervisor would be as important as it was to me then. And I remember this guy taking the first brief that I wrote, and before my very eyes, he reads it, comes in my office, and rips it into shreds. I said, this is going to be an adventure. Of course, you're also crushed, but I learned a little bit about practicing law and writing briefs, but wasn't quite sure I wanted to work in the Equal Employment Opportunities Commission, or mostly wasn't all that satisfied working in a big bureaucracy. I should tell you that a couple years after I left, Clarence Thomas came to head up the EEOC. So I think for me, chose a very good time to move on, and I got a job at the ACLU, and at the ACLU litigated cases around the country, challenging conditions in prison systems. I've spent a year commuting between Washington and Nashville, Tennessee, and I still have one of my prized possessions, a brick from the prison, the national penitentiary, the state penitentiary, when it was torn down. My co-counsel in Nashville flew to Washington to give me this brick. So some people have beautiful pictures in their offices and gavels and glassware. I have a brick that sits on my desk, but I'm very proud of. Was at the ACLU for 2.5 years, which was a wonderful job. As I explained to some of my lunch mates yesterday, I realized at the ACLU, who remembers the case of Lily Ledbetter, who lost her case in the Supreme Court? And remember one day, someone walks by Lily Ledbetter's desk. She's working at Goodyear Tire and Rubber. And someone informs her that the guy next to her is being paid a lot more than she does. She was being paid. Same thing happened to me at the ACLU. And when I discovered that, I was a little shocked. This was the ACLU. This was 1976. And it was, the women's movement had begun to flourish. Civil rights had begun to flourish. And I went home that night. And as we all do in life, when you're thinking about confronting your boss, you rehearse, right? And you rehearse not being angry, you rehearse being gentle and smart, but strong. So I rehearsed my speech, went in, said to my boss the next day, who I should tell you was a nationally celebrated civil liberties, civil rights lawyer. I said, Al, this guy next to me, Steve, I'm told he's getting paid a little bit more, and I can't figure that out. We have the same years out of law school, the same years here. We both, at that time, had 2 children. I said, we're pretty much equal. We've won the same number of cases. And my boss said at the time, Nan, Steve over there is the head of his household. And that was it. So I contacted the head of the ACLU. I'm going on too long. I'm sorry, Lou. And I said to the head of the ACLU, you can't do this. This is not right in the Civil Liberties Organization. And he said, Nan, let's not make waves. I said, all right, we won't make waves, with my fingers crossed. And it just turned out that the ACLU had hired a human resources person, a wonderful lawyer, and he and I hitched up and we got to work and we convinced the board of the ACLU to set a single standard for salaries, promotions, and the like. But sometimes in life, and you will see this with your plaintiffs, that often if you're the agent of change, things don't work out as happily for you after the change comes about. So I decided to go on my merry way and figured I probably needed another job. So I'm back where I was after law school. What am I going to do? I'm at the National Zoo celebrating Zoo Night, which is a night when everyone comes out to admire and talk to the animals. And I'm standing there with my 2 young children, and I see the guy over the seal pond who's running the Lawyers Committee for Civil Rights. I said, "Hey, Rod, do you know of any jobs?" And Rod says, "I do know of a job." So there I was the next day interviewing for a job, and boom, I took over one organization and kind of molded it into another organization. And we're still going. We're still chugging along after 31 years of a lot of fun. And I should tell you, and there are lessons in everything I've said, and you're picking up all these lessons, so we don't want to belabor it. But I need to tell you one thing. I started my organization with $5,000. That was all. $5,000 and a little bit of borrowed furniture. And so, as I say, I think if I can do it, I know that all of you can do it. And think about, some of the risks that are inherent, that are involved out there. I didn't take the job of a lifetime right out of law school, but those jobs are few and far between. As you all know, you got to think outside the major metropolitan areas. I got a daughter in Sioux Falls, South Dakota. Who would have known? Sioux Falls, South Dakota would have a wonderful opportunity for her. She's probably never going to talk to me again, but because we helped her get out there. But nevertheless, there's some fascinating jobs out there. They're not necessarily the tried and true ones, the fellowships, the ones in New York, D.C., Philadelphia, but they're out there. And, is it a wonderful time to be in public interest law? I sometimes tell my office that at the end of a day, and my days and your days and law teachers' days and everyone's days can be kind of long and grueling. And I'll get into the DC subway at night. And inevitably, because I've been in DC for a long time, I'll know someone on my subway card, and I'll look around, and it's more likely than not, it's a lawyer from a big firm. And I'll say, "Joe, it's so good to see you. How are you?" And Joe will say, "I'm doing okay." I said, "Well, what are you up to?" And almost always the lawyer will say to me, "Nan, I'm thinking about retirement. I'm thinking about my next home, the mountains, the oceans, the prairies, Sioux Falls. I'm thinking about where I'm going next." And then I'm thinking, what else am I going to say? And then inevitably I say, "So, what are you working on?" And then Joe will scratch his head for a while. And almost always the same answer, no matter who it is, he'll think about the last pro bono case he did. And it could be that it was 10 years ago. It doesn't matter. And he's not just saying it because he knows he's talking to me, but he knows that it was one of the most satisfying things he's done in private practice. So I kind of keep that subway story very much foremost in my mind when I'm talking to young people, and it's as true today as it was when I started out in this kind of long journey in public interest law. A couple things. Lou, if I have 5 more minutes? Okay. Why is this an exciting time for all of us right now? I think it's exciting because we certainly have a president in Barack Obama who thinks right. There's no question about it. But we have to have a president that does right. And we view our job at Alliance for Justice, as Ben will experience, is helping Barack Obama do his job. Now, we know he wants to do his job. How do we know that? This is a guy, and I love this about him. He turned down a Supreme Court clerkship to become a community organizer. That is a beautiful thing. Two, I remember during the height of the Bush years, although there were 8 years of heights in the Bush years, I remember every year we do a film on some other social justice issue. And our film that we were working on was called, I think, Quiet Conspiracy. It was one of our best, and it talks about the efforts by ultra-conservative organizations and lawyers to change the face of the judiciary, to change the law, to change the way we view the Constitution and the courts. And I remember at the end, we needed to find some individual who would kind of tie everything together. So being inside the Beltway, kinds of people that we are, we thought we have to find a senator to do it. And we needed a senator who was a little bit of a celebrity. Well, this was way before the primaries, and we made 3 phone calls. Our first phone call was to John Edwards. I should say to you, he never returned the phone call. We then called Hillary Clinton, a star then and a star now. And I knew her communications director, and her communications director said to me, "Nan, don't make me put Hillary in one of your films. They're too political." And then we called Barack Obama, who we had lobbied on any number of issues, and that's always was an experience lobbying Barack Obama, but we'll get to that at some point. We called his office thinking, we've struck out twice, this is the third. You know, we were already thinking like a good organizer, who are you going to call next? Called him at 6 o'clock that night. At 8 o'clock the next morning, I get a call from his chief of staff, a wonderful guy named Pete Rouse, who went with him to the White House. Pete Rouse says, "Nan, get your camera crew to our office at 9 o'clock a.m. Obama's leaving on a trip to Africa, but he would love to be in your film." And he was eloquent, he was articulate. He is a president who understands how important the Constitution is, and understands how important the Supreme Court is, but let's just say he's hit a few bumps in the road. He started out beautifully. Remember what his first act was? His first act was signing legislation overturning the opinion written by your own Samuel Alito in the Lilly Ledbetter case. I'm not blaming you, but that was his first act, signing the Lilly Ledbetter legislation. Second thing he did was called for the closing of Guantanamo, and so on and so forth. And now it's up to all of us to help him do the rest of his job. We do have, in April, a very exciting announcement. I do think either on his birthday, April 20th, or on the last day of oral argument, we will hear Justice Stevens announce that he is stepping down. And I want to say a word about Justice Stevens, because he has been a singularly magnificent, courageous justice for all of us. He is, on the Supreme Court, the master strategist, tactician. He does know how to count to 5. He's been able to craft majorities. He did it beautifully when Sandra Day O'Connor was on the court, and when he was in the majority, often assigned her the opinion to write, which only helped buck her up in writing opinions. He is the only justice, even in the recent Citizens United case, who talked about when the case came down, you all know about the Citizens United case, which allows corporate and union money to flow much more freely into elections. The only justice to say, when precedent was overturned, that the only difference between now and then, the old precedent, was the composition of the Supreme Court. He has been a leader on the Supreme Court, and therefore, replacing Justice Stevens is not simply replacing any ordinary justice, but it is replacing a leader. Has he been the liberal we've loved? Well, he's not a Thurgood Marshall, and he's not a William Brennan. There's no question about that. And interviewed on Nightline a couple years ago, Jan Crawford Greenberg asked a question, said, how do you feel about being the only liberal on the Supreme Court? And his answer was fascinating. His answer was, you know, I'm still the justice. I'm still the conservative. I was when Gerald Ford put me on the Supreme Court. The only difference now is that the court has swung so much to the right that my position is unusual now on this court. So we have a huge challenge ahead of us. We're hoping that President Obama will choose an individual with a track record of support for a very boisterous, robust sense of the Constitution. We're looking for someone who is keeping faith with core constitutional values, but we need someone who is a leader as Justice Stevens. And as we know, and I will conclude now, justices are even more powerful than presidents are. Presidents are there for 4, 8 years, but justices serve out terms that last long after a president leaves office. So this is an incredible opportunity for all of us. You all have a very powerful senator on the Senate Judiciary Committee, Arlen Specter, and communicating with Arlen Specter about the need to stand up to appoint a leader on the Supreme Court, I think would be a very important thing. Arlen Specter was the guy who confirmed John Roberts and Samuel Alito. John Roberts, and I won't go on too much, is probably the most powerful Chief Justice we have had in this country. He is incredibly smart, incredibly strategic, and has a vision. Arlen Specter knows about picking judges. It's an opportunity to reach out to Senator Specter, particularly this year. It's a critical one for him, and share your thoughts about who ought to be the next justice on the Supreme Court. So I would urge you to do that. We can talk a lot more, but I know there are alumni and students and teachers, and I'd love to hear what you all have to say. And thank you so much for giving me this honor.